Welcome to Courage Class. I'm Dr. Lindsay Chu, and each week I'm in conversation with our community's changemakers and trailblazers. Together, we explore the unspoken parts of our Asian and Western experiences, finding strength, growth, and healing that reflect who we truly are, not who we've been told to be. I'm so glad you're here. Class is now in session. Last week, I had shared what I learned from more than 40 Asian American women during a burnout workshop. And the thing that surprised me wasn't necessarily that they were exhausted. Okay, so I expected that. What surprised me was that they weren't asking for better coping strategies anymore. They were asking a much bigger, and in my humble opinion, very exciting question. They were asking, why the heck am I the one carrying this? Who decided that this was my responsibility? Do I even want this? And as I have reflected on that workshop this week, I realized that those women weren't actually talking about burnout. They were talking about authorship. They wanted to be the authors of their own lives again, and that got me really thinking. So, you guys, what does it actually look like to build something different? Because, awareness is amazing, right? It's wonderful. It's a necessary component to understanding what to build differently. But awareness doesn't necessarily change your life, okay? Somewhere along the way, the actual arrangement itself has to change. Now, I want to go back to a conversation that I had a couple of months ago from a good friend, Corie Chu. She came on Courage Class and she introduced me to this concept that she calls micro boundaries. And oh my God, it is so brilliant. Okay, so I want to play this clip.
I like to practice micro boundaries.
More, what is a micro
I
boundary?
think going from saying yes and doing things all the time to saying no is too shocking. And I think it's a good adjustment period for everyone.
Okay.
If you lay out a 4-week or 6-week game plan, I know it takes a little longer, but baby steps are good.
Yes.
It could be like, ultimately, my goal is to stop doing something for my mom. I'll use this as an example. So, my mom used to rely on me to help her do her tax returns. I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. This is too much. Every year we have to do this. It kind of sucks, right? Logging into my US bank accounts from here, sometimes, it goes wrong because I'm based in the US and the banks flag it. And then it becomes a
Or
whole.
you're based in Hong Kong. And
I'm based in Hong Kong. It's just so tedious.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to stop doing this. And I don't want her to rely on me to do this every year. But I felt guilty that she's getting older. And, why didn't I set these boundaries early on? Because I couldn't be bothered. I didn't want to explain it. I didn't really understand how to figure everything out all the time. So I was just like, it's just easier if I do it and I figure it out all together and do my return as well. And it just became a habit.
Yeah.
Right. And so last year I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. And I feel resentful because I'm constantly doing something I don't want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so to set those boundaries, I was like, okay, I'm going to give you the password for you to log in yourself. Or I'm walking her through. I knew I was going to spend more time building that foundation.
Yes.
And then walking her through. Right. And I just think it needs to be a realistic, right?
Yeah.
We need to work our way back down so that we can implement something new here, a new practice.
Yeah.
And I think for Asian parents, any parents really, but any parents who are getting a little old, who are, maybe a little bit more, too used to their ways, maybe a little stubborn, has a very certain strong point of view. And, maybe it might be like, oh, well, you're the daughter of the family. You need to take care of this. Or you need to support your older brother because he's the eldest son, or, something like that, right?
Yes.
You're not gonna change your parents. You're not gonna change that point of view.
No.
Unlikely.
I've learned that.
Unlikely.
I love my
You
parents, but yes.
can,
Yeah.
and if you're really lucky, you can.
Yeah.
If you're really lucky, they're willing to be open and
Yes.
willing to work with you.
Mm.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But most of the
Yeah.
time, no,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we have to accept that,
Yeah. And that's
right?
so hard to do because you're just like, but you know what? You're making me think. First of all, I love that you position it as like practicing a micro boundary because you're right. Going from yes to like total no, like that is a huge difference. That can be a gigantic leap for many of us who it has just been, this is the dynamic it's been between me and that other person for so long.
Yeah,
And like the notion of setting a micro boundary that like breaks it down. It's like scaffolding. Like I'm a teacher, right? Like we think about how to scaffold a concept, how to teach a concept, breaking it down like baby steps in order for them to understand like the bigger picture. So why shouldn't that apply to boundaries? And you're also making me think of something else. Boundaries is literally a spiritual practice. It
absolutely.
feels like this is protecting you, your time, your energy, and the boundary has to be so tailored to you and that person and that dynamic. Because hear all the time about like cutting your parents off, like you toxic parents or whatever. And, I hear that in like the social media ethosphere,
Yeah.
right? So when I first heard Corie's story, I completely thought it was about taxes. But when I went back and actually re-listened to what she was trying to teach us, I realized it wasn't necessarily about taxes and that this was about her relationship with her mom. Because Corie didn't wake up one day and simply decide that she wasn't going to help her parents anymore. She didn't say that. She wasn't like, why don't you just figure it out yourselves and like cut them off, which just feels so anti like what we collectively as an Asian American community, right, have grown up believing. I mean, generally speaking, okay. Instead, she did something much more interesting, and she actually changed the relationship that she had with her mom. She taught her mom how to log in, then how to navigate the website, right? And little by little, she transferred that responsibility to her mom. And it was 100% rooted in her love for and her respect for her parents. That's what I believe, and if you know Corie, she is such a lovely person overall. And she was really loving herself in that moment, okay? So she wanted her relationship with her mom to evolve because she also realized that the status quo relationship that they had it was exhausting. She couldn't manage like the time zones and having to like do her mom's taxes. I mean, it was too much, right? And so what I realize is that's exactly what I believe most of the women were asking for in this burnout workshop, okay? So they weren't asking or looking for permission to care less or to cut off their family member. Well, some of them were. And if anything, some of them had expressed a deep love and a deep desire to maintain that relationship. And like the thought of cutting that person off or out of their life was really, really something that was weighing on them. But it was almost as if they felt guilty even articulating that out loud because it's just so not what we learn growing up, generally speaking, in our community. They really needed sort of guidance on how to redesign this relationship that kept continuously, right, just taking from them. I think that sometimes we often misunderstand what women are asking for. I don't actually believe that women want to stop helping. I think that, and I have friends and I myself find incredible joy in being able to help my parents or help my family or support my partner. And I couldn't imagine a world where, that I would stop doing that. Okay, so I will give you an example from my own marriage. So a few years ago, Mike and I realized that our partnership was just not working. Neither of us intentionally had designed it this way. We had really just stepped into these stereotypical roles. It happened gradually. When you're 20s, it's different. Life is different, right? We didn't have kids. We lived in a big city. I mean, we still live in a big city, but we lived in New York City. And we really got to dictate the way in which our time and energy was spent. As we got older, he stepped more into being that producer, that provider role. And I stepped into managing 3 little kids while working full time. Neither of us woke up and decided that this is what was going to happen. We never had a conversation around this seems fair or this seems like the right thing to do for our family. We just unconsciously stepped into that, so much so that it just became our life. And we really tried everything when things got to be just, like I was like, this is not sustainable. We tried babysitters, therapy, tutors, a cleaning lady. And as I'm saying this, I'm also at the same time just recognizing the privilege and even being able to call upon this additional support layer. I know that this is not a reality for everyone. And it was incredibly hard because he traveled pretty routinely for his work. And we would meet, we tried meeting on a weekly basis. I mean, we were really trying to find a solution to the challenges that we were facing. We were really trying to earnestly solve it. But eventually I realized that we weren't really solving the core problem. The core problem wasn't the childcare. It wasn't the logistics. And by the way, Mom was the one who was managing all of the childcare. Even though we had people who were supporting us, I was the one still managing everything. I was managing the logistics of the house. I was literally the COO. The problem that we realized was that we had never stopped to ask whether the arrangement had made sense. And I remember Mike saying when things were just really challenging, he felt as though I had changed because I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, this is insane the way that we are living our life. It is exhausting and it's just taking way too much from me. And I'm not being allowed to essentially allocate my time and my energy into things that are meaningful. I didn't feel as though I was able to show up for my kids in the way that I really wanted to. And he kept saying, Lindsay, you've changed. Like, you saying that you don't want this life anymore, that is a change. And you know what? He was right. I had changed. And for the first time in my life, I really believed that I was worthy of protecting my own time and energy. Not because I wanted to contribute less, not because I love my kids or my family any less, but because I wanted a voice in deciding how our life was working, because we had unconsciously stepped into these very traditional husband and wife roles. And I did not want that anymore. I wanted to redesign. And that to me is a huge difference. The conversations that followed after were not easy. I'm not going to make light of the fact that, man, we almost didn't make it because there was so many tears. There was a lot of resistance, both of us digging our heels in. There was so much frustration. There was a lot of just drama. And eventually, I said something that I never honestly imagined that I would ever say. And I said to my husband, if our life continues exactly as it has been, I don't think I can stay. And this was not about punishment, but this was really about recognizing that not only could I no longer survive the status quo, I didn't want anything to do with it. I was like, I'm done. I'm finished. I've reached my capacity. I think that that's what I heard from those 40 women in that room. It wasn't that I don't love my family. That was not it at all. If anything, they deeply loved the people who, and you could just see how painful it was for them to say, I just don't want this status quo relationship. And I love my family so much, or I love the people in my life so much. It wasn't that they don't want to help. It wasn't that they are finished caring. They were saying that I honestly cannot keep giving in this way. You cannot keep taking from me in this way. That is a very different sentence. There cannot be a presumption that we just give in the way that in general, Asian American women have been trained to overgive. We have been trained to overfunction. And then nobody turns around and asks us, are we even okay with this arrangement? And that is the relationship or the expectation that I feel as a third generation Asian American woman, I can no longer accept. I love to care and I love to help and I love to support. And we need to have a conversation and make sure that whoever is in the relationship, that we are okay with this, the way in which it's playing out. Because I can no longer, again, assume and presume that just because I'm the woman, that I'm just going to take care of everything. Or even on my husband's side, that, because he's a man, that he's going to automatically be the provider. No. Let's get more creative. Let's really take ownership of how this plays out in our life. Okay, so you guys, I think that this is where the internet kind of loses me. Okay, I'm going to be very honest. Right now, there's a creator going viral because she's telling women to become useless to other people. And, I understand, as someone who has been trained to be so useful, I understand why that resonates. And when you have spent years and years over functioning for other people, that statement feels incredibly liberating. But I don't necessarily think that that's where I want to go. I don't want to become useless. I want relationships that are collaborative. I want relationships where people ask, where responsibilities are discussed, and where we periodically revisit that arrangement and check on one another. The issue for me isn't necessarily about caring. It's the assumption that I'm just going to do that, because I'm a woman or because I'm an Asian American woman. It's when people unconsciously assume that you will be the one who remembers. That is what really bothers me. That is what just, that it's almost exhausting to have to explain that, no, like you need to ask me permission to take from me. There's an assumption that you will be the one who anticipates, who organizes, who sacrifices. There's not an ask, right? There's not a conversation. And there is a profound difference between choosing to help and never being given the opportunity to choose. And then nobody checking up on you to see, are you even okay with this? Or how are you feeling in this relationship? I think that was also, I felt like, part of the heartbreak in that room. And I can speak, from my own experience, that is part of the heartbreak. The exhaustion is just, oh my gosh, feeling like nobody cares about how you are feeling in that relationship. Honestly, I'm going to say the unpopular thing right now. And I think that as Asian American women, we have to do that work too. Because no one else can believe that we are worthy of protecting our time if we don't believe it ourselves. Many of us are praised for being responsible, reliable, helpful, selfless. Exhaustion almost becomes proof that we are doing life correctly or we are doing the right thing, right? And I honestly don't believe that at all anymore. I think that generosity, of course, is one of the most beautiful parts of being a person, of being a human. But generosity only means something if it is chosen. Okay, if you are never allowed to say no and it's just expected of you, or it's treated like a value, or you're grateful, you should be grateful. A good woman should be grateful to do these things. Oh my gosh, then your yes or your helpfulness doesn't really mean anything, right? Because, life changes and kids grow up and parents age and jobs change and health changes. The relationship should change as well to reflect those very, natural or normal life transitions. Healthy relationships cannot possibly be governed by inherited assumptions or stereotypical roles. They have to be redesigned through conversation and collaboration. Okay, so here's the question I want to ask all of you. And this is what I've been really wondering about this week. Okay, so where in your life has responsibility quietly become an assumption? Like they just expect you to do this, not because anyone is being malicious or Not because the person, is not a bad person. And when I say that, I'm talking about the adults, okay? Simply because no one has ever stopped to ask, does this arrangement, this collaboration, still work for us? I think that is the conversation. That is where the change begins. In addition to you believing that you are worthy of having your time and energy protected. Okay. So the last thing I will say is none of this is easy. At least it wasn't easy for me to really understand that my time energy is deserving of being protected. And what I realized is I have to take radical responsibility for protecting my time and my energy. And that required a lot of just like digging down and understanding myself and believing that that is true, that I don't have to overgive to the point of exhaustion, that my time and my energy is worthy of protection, but nobody is coming to save you, to do that for you. You have to be the one responsible for believing that and then declaring that and then engaging in that, frankly, uncomfortable conversation. But you know what? You can do it. I know that you can. And when we change how these caring relationships happen in our own homes, we better equip the next generation. And there's a ripple effect, right? There's a ripple effect out into the world when we declare our time and energy as worthy of protection. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Courage Class. I hope today's conversation gave you a little encouragement and inspiration. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And for extra motivation, tools, and behind-the-scenes content, sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to share with you more there. See you next time. All right, and now for the legal language. Courage Class with Dr. Lindsay Chu and content posted by Dr. Lindsay Chu is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast or website is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnosis or treatment. Users should not regard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professional for any such conditions.